Good morning, friends. I'm just going to wait for a couple of people to show up here before I talk to you guys. So, okay. So, it is Erev Yom Tov, Erev 7th day of Pesach here in Jerusalem. And honestly, I was kind of sitting around before this, not so much sitting around, actually preparing the meal, but I was thinking what to talk about. I didn't know what to talk to you guys about. There's a lot of things that happened, or things that are happening, things that I saw, things that I saw in the news, and or just general ideas that, and they seemingly, in my mind, I was trying to put them together, and they were seemingly kind of not, coming together in a succinct, I guess, order or seder, as it were, to use the appropriate terminology. But and then I was like, you know what? I wanted to, I'll talk to you guys something that's relevant to, at least conceptually, to Pesach. So I have a friend. He is a very special person. He lives in Tzfat. I don't know if you can call him a rabbi. But he does a lot of what's called energy work with people, primarily over the phone, sometimes in person. And apart from the work, he does. He writes. He writes about really what's going on from the lens of the Torah, and particularly from the lens of Kabbalah and the lens of, I guess, again, I don't like using the English terminology for these things. I'll say the Moshiach process. I'll say the messianic process. It sounds like some kind of a. I really, I'll tell you guys something, and I think some of you guys are watching who are Christians, non-Jews. I really don't like what the English language has done to the Torah, and has done to Hebrew, or has done to really, really deep concepts in the Torah and in Kabbalah and Jewish philosophy and Jewish mysticism. When it's it was translated to English, it just makes it sound just very, very, for lack of a better term, culty. So when I you'll hear me go out of my way to use the Hebrew terminology. There's a reason for that, because I don't want it to lose its meaning, and I also don't want it to be um, dismissed, easily dismissed or frowned upon. So my friend, he's really tapped into this whole thing, and he kind of brings a lot of concepts, what's going on in the world today, as far as what's going on in Europe and America and the economy and geopolitics, and who the Arabs. I mean, we kind of know, like we kind of already know. For those of you guys who listen also to Rabbi Kessin, and even before Rabbi Kessin, we had our sages write about these things, like we know who Ishmael is, we know who Esau is, or Edom, we know who Yaakov is, or slash, slash, what's his name, Yitzhak, Avram Avinu. We know that the West and the Arab world, or slash, you can even extend it to the Muslim world. So he speaks a lot about these things. Um, and 2 days ago, he posted on his Facebook page. He said, a lot of my friends. He goes, I noticed that a lot of my friends are very upset that they were expecting, literally, like literally, in almost a very kind of childish way, for Eliyahu Hanavi, for Elijah the prophet, to literally, physically, in the flesh, show up at their doorstep on Seder night. At the end of the Seder, and then he went on to write, "You guys don't really seem to understand." He goes, first of all, um, on a philosophical level, the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, happened on the seventh day. So we are only on the. I think at that time he wrote it. We're on the third day or the fourth day or whatever it is. Secondly, Mashiach. I mean, meaning at the end of the day, it is a person, but before it is a person, first and foremost, it's a process. And what is the process? The process is primarily, ladies and gentlemen, the Jewish people returning to their homeland, coming back, building, and even with all its, and you guys can argue with me, and all its flaws and all its problems and all its issues and all its, seemingly things that have nothing to do with even Hashem or the Torah. Even with that, that is part of the Mashiach process. The Jewish people, I was saying at the end of the last program that and I was speaking directly at Jews and telling people that maybe now's a good time to start thinking about, at least thinking about, so to speak, picking up your stuff, packing it up, and going home to Israel, right? So because at the end of the day, we can say, well, America has been really nice to the Jews and people feel comfortable. But I mentioned that in every single, Jewish history is a broken record, right? It's a broken vinyl record. So if we know that, then we've seen Jews who thought they were comfortable in Spain, or thought they were comfortable in Poland and in Russia and in Germany and in France and all these different places. And at the end of the day, the result, after some years, maybe even centuries, the result is always the same. And I was saying that the only difference now in the epoch that we live in today is the fact that we have a Jewish state with a government and an economy and an army. We can defend ourselves literally, and we have defended ourselves, and we have the ability to do that for the first time in 2,000 years, a little bit less than that, 1,900 years. And those of you sit around and say, well, Tzvi, oh, you sound like so Zionist and this and that. For me, it's not about Zionism. It's not about ideologies. It's not about this rabbi or that, organization or yeshiva or whatever, or movement. It's about just looking around me physically and seeing reality and accepting reality for what it is and the progression of reality and what's actually happening, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, again, I don't want to. It's Pesach, and also the rabbis have been telling us, we have to focus on unity and focus on, not speaking lashon hara. The only thing I will say is that I'm talking to my friends who are, so to speak, coming and saying that you don't recognize the state of Israel, you don't recognize this or that and the other. My Orthodox friends, and I'm telling you, I love you guys, and I hear your point, and I actually know the sources that you are basing your opinions on, and I actually think that those sources are valid. But I'm telling you right now that reality is like a freight train, history is a freight train, and at some point you don't have to acknowledge the government or the state or the Medina, as you call it, the Medina, the Treifa Medina, as you say. But you have to acknowledge what's happening. You have to acknowledge the fact that what you've been davening for and what I've been davening for in the Siddur 3 times a day, in particular, one of the blessings, the brachas, which calls for kibbutz galiot, the ingathering of the exiles, ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. It's really, really, really happening to the point where we're asking a question, especially I'm compelled to ask a question because, I was born in the former Soviet Union, and the dream, and still is the dream for a lot of Russian Jews, and a lot of them already accomplished that dream, was to go to America and do the things that they couldn't do in the Soviet Union and accomplish this and actualize that, and by and large I think we've done it, you know but who would think in their right mind that the kids, some of the kids of these people, would not only, it's one thing to become a Torah observant Jew, and even in America it's not that difficult. You have all these organizations in Kirov and Chabad and all these things. It's quite another for a Russian Jew, a young Russian Jew in the United States, to get up and to say, hey, you know, hey mom and dad, guess what? I want to make Aliyah. I want to go live in Israel. I want, I want to. Basically, what they're saying is, hey mom and dad, I want to go live in a country where some of your friends live and some of your relatives live, and you always joke with them that they got on the wrong plane or the wrong boat, and how they wish they would come to America, how they wish they would have came to America. And we have people like this. And I remember when I moved here 10 years ago, the first time I moved here, and people, Russian-speaking Jews in Israel, some of them, not all of them, but there was a few that they were just kind of looking at me like, dude, there's something wrong with your brain, all right? And maybe they're right. Maybe there is something wrong with my brain. Just like the people that came here in the 1800s and the people that came here in the middle of the 20th century, something is wrong. I think that every person that comes to Israel to live in Israel from a more, let's say, developed country, or a country that actually has things like, proper customer service, or this service or that service, or so to speak, infrastructure, more developed infrastructure than what Israel has, even though Israel has improved greatly. I think that any of these people can be classified as a little bit certifiable. Let's put it that way. But, ladies and gentlemen, this only goes to show that, there's that phrase, those who were thought to um, those who were dancing, were thought to be crazy, but by those who could not hear the music. Meaning, ladies and gentlemen, we hear the music. The people who are choosing out of out of pure desire to be in the land, of Israel, not because they're being harassed in Europe or wherever they are, or anti-Semitism. The people who are just choosing and saying, "This is my home. I want to go live here." They hear certain music that other people, including people in their families and their friends, cannot hear until history, as I said before, until history forces them to hear it again, and that'll be a different music. You know what I'm saying? Right now is the music of just, you know us seeing what's happening, what's unfolding before our eyes. By no means do I mean to say, ladies and gentlemen, that this is ideal, that we live in an ideal state. That I'll tell you something. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, so here's where the relevance comes in. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and he's by all means, so to speak. Even though he told me yesterday he doesn't feel like he's American and never felt like he was American, but for by all accounts, he's an American Jew, meaning he grew up in Boston and he ended up making Aliyah in his 20s. He went to yeshiva. He became what you would call frum, or whatever you want to call it. He met his wife here. She's Israeli. They lived here for a little bit, and at some point, they decided to move back to the States. They now live in Florida, and I was talking to him, and he was just telling me about all the things that why he left Israel, and so to speak, the things that, because he admitted to me that there was things that in the States that he was used to, and at some point he goes, Israel just kind of a little bit, so to speak, if you're not in it to win it, and if you're not in it for the long haul, it a little bit grinds you down, especially you have kids and this and that and all these kind of things, and I told him, listen, what's funny, I shared with him and I admitted to him that I just moved back to Israel back like 3 months ago in January after a long hiatus, even though I was coming here on trips and business trips, and pretty much I left, since I moved back to the States in 2013, I was coming here every year, at least once a year, maybe twice a year, for a 6 year span, and then I moved back 3 months ago, and I told him that just before I moved back, I was involved in, I guess, in the political sphere in the Jewish world, both outside of it, a little bit outside of Israel, but also inside of Israel in some capacity. And I told him that experience, and the experience is still kind of going on, has led me to see the almost like incongruency or disconnect between what's happening in the political sphere in Israel and what's happening, so to speak, on the ground in Israeli society with just basic things in people's lives, right? And it's funny, in the past 3 months, I've kind of got a little bit disenchanted, right, with some of the things, and and especially you see now what's going on with the elections, and we've had three elections and all these things. and you realize the whole thing is the system is broken, but you also realize that people might just be tired of what's been going on. Meaning, since I moved here, it's been 10 years, right? So when I first lived here, I was like, okay, so there's problems, but it's the country's improving and this is improving. And in 3 years time I was here, I noticed those improvements. But after I came back here 3 months ago, and I saw that basically not a lot of things, a couple of things improved, but most things that I thought would improve did not. And then I thought to myself, well, this guy's been the prime minister for 10 years. He's done a lot of stuff, a lot of great things externally, as in the capacity of like a foreign minister dealing with people externally. But what has he really done to improve the lives of Israelis? Not a whole hell of a lot. You could say, oh, economy, this, that, and the other. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, like things are more. Real estate is expensive, food is expensive, cars here cost double, or maybe triple. Um, it's difficult to start a business, both administratively and just financially, tax wise, whatever it is. So I was telling my friend this, but then I told him, with all that said, everything I just told you, everything about life, or things that I thought would improve, and this and that and the other. At the end of the day, I can still be rendered certifiable because at the end of the day, I would still, especially now that I see what's going on with Corona, there is no other place I would rather be stuck, holed up in my apartment than here in Jerusalem. I was just telling my friend, like if I walk a block north of my apartment, I will hit this open area that I told you guys about the other day, and I will, you know, which is actually called the Valley of Evil Counsel. It's actually connected to, not my religion, to the Christian religion, and it's actually where there's a house which used to be the home of a very corrupt priest, corrupt Cohen Gadol, high priest back in the times of the temple, and it's a home. Supposedly, the story goes is that's where Mr. J.C. Penney was sold out by Judas. And then a friend of mine, actually, who I ran into, he showed me a rock behind the shul, behind the synagogue. There's like this stone that apparently the rock is like 2,000 years old, or maybe more, maybe older, and it was used by people for worshiping Baal Peor. At least that's how the story goes. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is like a block away from my house, all this stuff. Not that it's my religion, not that it's this, not that it's that, but it's just like I'm living in just ancient history, and I'm just here, and again, no matter what it looks like, no matter that we just had 3 elections, and now you guys probably heard last night, but the two Bennies, as I like to call them, just asked the President Rivlin for a 2-day extension. He didn't want to give him a 2-week extension, but they asked him for 2 days, basically till the end of Pesach, to kind of get their stuff together and figure out a coalition or emergency coalition, or I don't know what they're gonna figure out. I have my own opinions on what is going to transpire here after this, but even with all these issues and that third election and these guys and Bibi's about to have a trial. I think it's sometime in the end of May, and everything that's going on and Corona and all this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, like, I was talking to another friend, and I told her that she's in the States, and I told her, listen, I have a flight to come visit my parents in a couple of weeks, and she goes to me, just stay put, man. Just stay put until this whole thing is over. She's like, I'm surprised the airline didn't cancel your flight. I'm like, well, I had another airline. They did cancel it. Now they hopefully will refund. But I have, another airline that so far they haven't canceled anything. They just gave people, they don't want to lose money. So they're just giving people free waivers, or rather the waive the fees. So if you want to change your flight, you can change them ad nauseum. Like, I already, this third time I already changed my flight. So changed my dates. So what they're basically saying is that we're not going to give you a cashback. I mean, unless you really want it. But they're giving people the option to at least change their dates, because they know people at the end of the day are hoping that this thing ends at the end and they want to fly. Sorry guys, I was a little bright there. Yeah, I mean, so But she told me, she's like, don't even, why, like, why are you gonna fly now? Even in 2 weeks, like, why do you need to fly? You know? And I was just like, she's like, you're in the best place. You're stuck in the best place there's to be stuck. You know? And it's interesting. I have a friend who lives in Florida, or who was living in Florida, and then he just got in his car right before Passover, and he drove to New York to be with his family on the Passover Seder. And I'm like, dude, are you nuts? You're driving into Chernobyl. And he's like, well, he's like, I'd rather be miserable, at least with family, than miserable alone in Florida. I'm like, what am I gonna do? There's no, nobody's having Seder, even a community Seder. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm like, I get it, but and it's crazy. He told me when he pulled into the city, he was driving through Manhattan, and he actually passed. He decided just to, on his car, not to get out of the car, but just to pass through like Chinatown and the lower Manhattan. He's like, dude, I'm nuts, right? I'm like, yeah, you're a little crazy, but yeah, I mean, it's just like he's just going stir crazy. Like he didn't know what to do with himself. And even now, he messages me and he's like, "Hey man, like what am I gonna do? I don't know what's flying. He had some job over there, and then it didn't. I guess it fell through, or he thought it fell through, and apparently it didn't fall through. But by the time they asked him if he's gonna be working, he was already in a car halfway to he was somewhere in the middle of I don't know, North Carolina or something like that, passing through North Carolina. So a lot of people are, I have another friend messaging me from Brooklyn. He's just like, dude, I'm trying to get my income stuff together, my parnasa. And I told him, listen, man, the best thing you can do you know, is just kind of work your LinkedIn account and build relationships and network, you know. And he's like, yeah, man, but I'm looking around and I'm looking at all these people, my friends around me, my peers, and everybody's successful and this and that. I'm like, dude, first of all, this is a cliche quote. Comparison is a thief of joy. Always remember that. That's first of all. Second of all, this guy is messaging me. He's 26 years old, and I told him, dude, I hate to sound like Gary Vaynerchuk's parrot, but dude, I mean, like, you're not even 30, man. I told him I'm 39 years old, man. I started a business that I've been eating, what. My partner and I have been eating, what, in for the past 4 years, and finally now, like, my partner just messaged me yesterday. He's like, because I told him certain things that are about to happen, and in our business, thank God, finally. And he just goes to me, for the first time like ever or in a while. I'm sensing. He goes to me. I'm sensing that there's going to be significant movement. And I said, yeah, man. It only took like 4 years, But that's the game. And I told my friend, I was like, dude, listen, man. Like, build your networking. Try to figure out what you can do in this environment, in this new environment, especially in America, to where you will become indispensable. Meaning something that people will always need. I'm very lucky. I work in the wine business. I just saw a report that people are basically sitting in their homes and doing nothing but drinking, eating chocolate, and smoking marijuana. People are ordering marijuana, like delivery marijuana, drinking wine, drinking other things, and watching Netflix and eating chocolate. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard of the phrase "death by chocolate"? Welcome, welcome. Like, I just like that's what's happening, and I'm like, okay, great. Like, listen, I'm not. Again, I always say, and I said this I think in the first ever live I did. I said I'm not a fan of people becoming alcoholics or God forbid, dying as a result of when I'm selling them. But I'm all about the brachas and the celebration and elevating and spiritually and uplifting. But listen, I'm in one of the best businesses to be in right now. That's just the reality here, ladies and gentlemen. It's something that something that does not go out of style. It's like, or as we say, these people are drinking wine like it's going out of style, but it isn't. It's not going out of style. It never will. So so that's that. And I told them, listen, become indispensable. That's the advice I would have for people. Not that I'm some giant expert, but it's just what I'm seeing, and I feel like there's a lot of things that are, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, they're not going to go back to normal. Trump is talking about, well, how we're going to reopen the economy. I want things back to normal, or as they said in that movie, let's turn the machines back on. Mr. President, the machines will not be turned back on. You know, every time I turn around, I see an article pop up on my feed about how this person, that famous economic advisor, and this famous economist is telling people to to get into cryptocurrencies. Why? Because we're basically sitting around. The Fed is sitting around and devaluing the dollar. How are they devaluing the dollar? They are printing money to bail out basically the banks and pump trillions of dollars into the system, $2 trillion into the system, and also to bail out, people, give people $1,200 or however, maybe even more, handing out money, handing out dollars like it's going out of style again. And so, okay, so at some point, ladies and gentlemen, people don't really have a conception of something called inflation or even hyperinflation until it actually happens. And I was telling my friend today that the U.S. The Fed, I think there's a law. I don't know when it was passed. I think in the '70s that the Fed is by law required to publish the amount of dollars, U.S. dollars that are in circulation around the world at any given point, and they haven't done that I think in 40 years or 50 years. And I said that it's either if we publish a number or hyperinflation happens, people will start to think, or they'll sit down and they'll look at the toilet paper and they'll start to think, okay, should I use this to wipe you know what, or should I use this as a new currency instead of a dollar? Okay, I meant that as kind of a dark joke. What I mean to say is, ladies and gentlemen, there's something that's going to come along. I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin. I think it might be another digital currency, one of the 5,000 that exist right now. That is going to be, it's going to go from being an investment, which is largely what it is now, to being a currency, and the people who are holding it now will be probably some of the people who will be, so to speak, the purveyors of the economic system, and they're going to be considered very, very wealthy. Um, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that's really the story. I mean, like, if you look at all of history, and by the way, one other thing I noticed there's a an app called BizX, and they have seen their um, traffic increase 30 or 40%. What is the app? The app is a barter app. It's basically people get on there and they have things what to barter, and they barter with each other. I'll give you a jar of honey for a chicken, or I'll give you this for that. And that really, if you think about it, before we created what's called fiat currency, paper currency, that was really. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody decided to give me a call. So, yeah, that was the system we had. We had first, it was, I think it was grain. Like Yosef. The story of, speaking of Egypt, the story of Yosef in Egypt. So he managed to store all the grain. So grain was currency. I think in Roman times also, the granaries, all that kind of stuff. Because bread was essentially a commodity and currency. And then it went into just physical. Sorry about that again. It went to gold. It went to all these other things like physical gold and physical, what they call talents of gold, silver, and eventually, I guess the banking system started, and people. Just one second, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize. I'm getting calls left and right. I'm getting calls on my Viber, getting calls on my phone, on my WhatsApp. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, and then we came up with paper currency. But the thing is, with paper currency, it has to be backed by something. It actually has to be backed by those physical things that I just spoke about, like gold and all these things. And at some point, we took the dollar off the gold standard. And so now the question is, what is our dollar worth? What is it backed by? It's not backed by anything. It's only backed by the perception of human beings, of how we perceive it. How many dollars are we willing to give or assign value to for this product, this phone that I'm holding in my hand, or this plastic table or metal table that I'm looking at, or my air conditioning. How much am I willing to pay per month for the company to run my electricity so I can have an air conditioner or a heater, that kind of stuff. And it's called the collective consciousness perception of human beings in any given place, municipality, state, country, economy, whatever. Obviously, there's other things that come into play like trade and all these kind of things. Obviously, right? That's economics. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, the dollar is not backed by anything, and now that they're printing more and more of it, and there's other things that have emerged as viable alternative, store, so to speak, store of value, the conversation is continuing. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, um, I'm gonna go skedaddle. I'm gonna continue preparing the meal for tonight. Just understand that everything that I just outlined and I just said, it all actually connects with what's happening with, I guess, with the Mashiach process. And just to go back to what my friend in Tzfat said, it really is a process, and we're in it. It really started, I guess, with the first Aliyah, and then finally when we got our state after 60 years of not, I mean, there were Jews here, and then there was even a chief rabbi, Rav Kook, actually, was one of them, and we finally got a state, and we had some wars, and then we got Jerusalem back. That was another seminal moment, which I'll talk about in the next show. There was a lot of stuff, if you notice, happening in 1967 around the world, not just in Israel, but everywhere. It was kind of like this global revolution, for better or worse, right? And a lot of rabbis um, were saying that a portal opened up at that time, and we're still in it. And I think a new portal opened up here, what we're experiencing here with coronavirus, and I think again, it's no accident that it came along right after Purim, that it got intense right after Purim, and it went right into Pesach. And I think once we get out of Pesach, we'll see, and going into Lag BaOmer, which is a whole other interesting interesting holiday, and then going into Shavuot. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, the next, I guess, 40 days, let's say, 40, and what did we count? We counted yesterday. I don't remember. Well, let's say the next 45 days will be very, very interesting. Let's put it that way, on a spiritual and physical level. And I hope it only gets better from here, and I hope that all the people that I spoke about who are not hearing the music, and will start to hear the music, and maybe people like me, myself, and others like me won't be considered crazy or certifiable anymore. Maybe we all become crazy, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are. If we're not already, everybody stay healthy and safe, and have bring the Yom Tov. Have a nice end of Pesach, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Hak Sameach.